Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Okay. My name is Hyojung Park, and I'm the Interim Associate Dean for Research in the Manship School of Mass Communication. And I know that most of the people here know who I am, but I had to introduce. So I hope you all had a chance to enjoy lunch and have a great conversations with your colleagues. And now we are excited to begin our research symposium. And it is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. So for those of you who are not able to attend the symposium in person, and they can watch the symposium on YouTube. And this event features the recipients of our pilot grant program who will be sharing their updates on research progress and preliminary findings. So to officially begin our symposium, we have a special message from our dean, Dr. Dean Bissell. So she's not able to attend the symposium in person, but she recorded this message to kick off our event. So as many of you know, Dean Bissell has been a tremendous supporter of faculty research and collaboration. In addition to her leadership role, as you know, that she's also a highly accomplished scholar herself who understands firsthand the value of research and interdisciplinary collaboration. This pilot grant program and today's symposium would not have been possible without her vision and support. So we are deeply grateful for her leadership and support to build a strong research community in the Manship School. So let's go ahead and play the video.
All this morning. Thank you so much for attending the Manship School Research Symposium. It is an honor to see you all, and most importantly, it's an honor to be able to recognize the recipients of the Manship School and Riley Center Research Grants. We have 4 winners that you're going to hear from today, all recipients of pilot funding to support the research you're going to hear about later today. Thank you again for being here. Go Tigers!
Okay, to give you a bit of a background, we awarded pilot grants to 4 research teams in December as a part of our initiative to foster interdisciplinary collaboration. And so this pilot grant program is to support research labs and working groups that can grow into larger scale research and lead to external funding applications. These projects are supported through funding from the Manship School of Mass Communication and the Riley Center for Media and Public Affairs. To be eligible for funding, the PI, Principal Investigator, had to be a Manship faculty member, but proposals were required to include at least 1 collaborator from outside of PI's area within the school or from another academic unit. Applicants were also asked to indicate how graduate students will be involved in research working groups and research labs as a part of the project. The selection process was both rigorous and competitive. We invited 11 external reviewers from other Research One institutions to evaluate the proposals. So they were impressed by the quality of the proposals submitted. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the high caliber of the submissions, which was a true reflection of the research excellence in the Manship School. Now we are ready to move into the heart of the symposium, the research presentations. So each group will have about 15 minutes to present. So if you have any questions during the presentations, please hold them until the end. And so we are going to have time for Q&A after all the presentations are finished. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So the first Our first presentation is titled Emotional and Punitive to Crime News on TikTok, a multi-method study using computational and psychophysiological approaches. So this project is led by Dr. Janice Lee, Dr. Royce Choi, and Dr. Hyunsu Oh from the Department of Sociology. So please welcome Dr. Lee and Dr. Choi as they present their work.
First of all, thank you for having us to get the opportunity to present this presentation. My goal is to finish it in 15 minutes, so I'm going to just a little quickly. So our study mainly focused on the emotional and punitive reaction to the crime news on TikTok. Multi-method study using the computational and psychological approaches. I'm Janice Lee. Here is Dr. Royce Choi, and there is from the sociology, Dr. Hyunsu Oh. And he's a graduate student in Shaha. Is coming to here. To make it work and to make it completed this research project, we created a working group, the research working group called the Digital Cognition and Computational Analytics Lab. We can call it DCAL. So DCAL mainly focuses on the public attitudes on the critical issues and using the cutting-edge techniques. There are our great PhD students, Tu Truong, Morgan Bedrug, Yuen Diep, Kelly Hewitt, and Min Yuen. I'm going to a little bit briefly explain about how we come up with this topic. As you all know, the TikTok news, and TikTok is one of the most downloaded app worldwide in 2024. So TikTok has become essential outlets, not only young adults and young people, not only for the entertainment part, but also it's gaining political information and news as well. So news publishers are embracing TikTok to reach the young audiences more and more. So based on our literature review, the TikTok video is more towards about the themes and the education, emotional violence, visual effects, camera angle, but it's more focused on the close-up and wide shots, and background music, language features, video length, and hashtag use. But in our study, we are more focused on the types of camera views. Based on the previous study, Chang and Lee, there are 3 types of camera view on TikTok news reporting. The first one is the first person view. So it's more like what characters see actually. So it allows to viewers to perceive that they have virtual entered in situation in the news stories. The second person view is show that the character talks directly to the viewers in front of the camera. So it is very common on TikTok news reporting, TikTok videos as well. And it is known that this type of news is more engaging. The last one is third person view, is it presents the character, the narrator, as the outside of the events. And then the character is seen at the distance from the different perspective angle. So in this news form, viewers see more 2 characters, mostly a reporter and interviewees. Okay. Or the 2 characters have a conversation to explain the complicated issues such as politics and new government orders and so on. So our study is divided into 2 studies. Actually, we developed this research project to do more TikTok news consumption engagement using the competition method, and then based on these findings from it, and then we towards to the psychological study design. But we realized that there are scarce studies and scarce algorithm to running all these TikTok news videos. So we decided to take just 2 parts and then running these 2 studies simultaneously. Just the second part of the computation study, well, Dr. Choi is more explain it. But here is, I'm going to briefly about the psychological study, how it's running this study currently. So it's still running, and then we are in the last stage of our RLB. Because we're using the psychological method, like eye tracking, galvanic skin reactions, and facial expressions, which we need to collect some participants' identifier, is a slightly delayed the confirmation of the RLB. But in the study is very descriptive study in this stage and how news audiences react to TikTok crime news differently by camera angles. So we designed a between subject study, and then we collected some cases from the crime news. Okay. Okay.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
no.
We're going to hand you a mic.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to hand you a mic. You can
Got
do
it,
the rest
okay.
of the presentation in front of it. Sorry.
No problem.
What's up? She's going to come in front of it with the handheld. Right, they'll be able to see it by looking back at this. How's she going to click this? We have a clicker. You've been a teacher for how long? I'm sorry, guys. We tested this for 2 hours yesterday. Everything worked fine. Oh, you got it.
All right, yes. So let's continue to this one. So I'm gonna just continue to this study. Study design is very descriptive stage because we are aiming to the external grant opportunity based on this pilot study. So we designed a between subject design, and then we specifically using some crime cases from the TikTok news reporting. So we selected case 1 and 2 is murder, the killing the suspect's wife, and then she is a white woman. And then case 2 is killing 2 white girls, and then they are totally utter strangers. Because from the previous literatures, figure that people, the audiences, are more anger and then they have more punitive attitudes towards whatever their gender and whatever their ethnicity. They are eager to anger with the white women, and then even the young white women. So we specifically chose two cases. And then these are the TikTok, the stimuli that we chose, and then we mainly focusing on the news reporting, and then we have to have like durations and more similar, and then a date as something similar in the period. The measure we're going to see is emotions and punitive attitudes. Using psychological measures, we detect the 7 core emotions: joy, anger, fear, surprise, sadness, contempt, and disgust. And then to measure punitive attitudes using the psychological measure is not easy, because this punitive attitude is more complex procedure, complex emotional and cognitive. But measuring this core emotions, we can have like emotions, cognitive precursors to punitive attitudes. So the core, this study is how we can connect those very basic core emotions, how we connect it to the punitive attitudes. To justify, to get the link between the cognitive emotional precursors to the punitive attitudes, we also conduct self-reported pre and post surveys. So we're now at the RFB process right now. Once that is completed, we're gonna do the experiment right away. The next slide is going to the Dr. Che.
Thank you, and sorry for all the chaos that's happening. So my name is Royce Choi, so I'm gonna talk more about our computational part of the project. So we entered, for this computational part of the project, our tasks are we have two main tasks. So first one was to computationally categorize news topics that's depicted in the new TikTok videos. And the second was to computationally categorize the types of camera view. So we weren't able to see the visuals, but that Dr. Lee mentioned the first and second and third person view. And the reason why we wanted to categorize these TikTok videos based on the news topic is that most of the social media platforms don't have don't provide any built-in categorization in these terms. And well, that's okay because they're social media platforms. It's not like typical, it's not news publishers. But still, as a communication scholars, I think since the social media platforms like TikTok has become such a popular and important source for news, we thought it's essential that we understand some of the contents, especially that's coming out from those news organizations on TikTok, to think in terms of this framework. And the computational category classification of these camera viewpoints, we think this study will really have a substantial contribution to the growing body of computational communication research. So I'll walk you through what we did so far. For the first task, we used a topic modeling framework called BERT topic. So this uses transformer-based topic modeling, transformer-based model like BERT, and this supports various topic modeling approaches. And since we are trying to define put all the TikTok videos into a predefined set of topics, we selected to go with a guided topic modeling approach. And what this does is that we can actually come up with some seed words. So, and this BERT topic model would do is, based off of these seed words, it will determine which of each topics are most appropriate or most related to a certain TikTok video. So as you can see, we came up with these seed topic words. So if you see the seed topic word second one here, that one is clearly geared towards politics news. So we came up with those keywords and did some topic modeling. And this is our preliminary key crosstab that we found. So just to talk a little bit about our data, we collected about 34,257 TikTok videos from 19 news organizations on TikTok. So we selected those news organizations based on their number of followers while trying to maintain the balance between their original media type and their presence. So even this is a very simple cross-step, but we can see that some interesting patterns, right? If you see how these topic distributions lay out across news organizations, we find that like Fox News and Now This Impact, which are kind of more partisan, politically weighted channels, tend to touch politics far more than others. So it seems like the BERT topic is capturing something meaningful in terms of even when we're just using the video description text. So we're not even transcribing all of those. So these are some of the patterns that we've been finding for the first topic task. The second task is a little bit more complicated. So it's trying to categorize different camera view. And for this, we're exploring a model called OpenAI's CLIP. So this is short for contrastive, I forgot, but yeah, this is a clip. And what this does is you can actually classify certain image frames based off of a natural language text prompt, right? So the main advantage of this is that it allows you to do zero-shot classification. So what that means is that you can just, as if you're using ChatGPT, you can come up with different text prompts, and this model is able to classify image based off of the text prompt without further training. So this is a big advantage for us as a starting point, like in the earlier stage of classification models. So we utilize this. So this is possible because this CLIP model is trained on about more than 400 million pairs of image and text. So it can it already has a trained set of data that can put certain text and image elements into a shared embedding space. So we came up with a kind of more comprehensive set of text prompts that we fed into these model to categorize each of these camera views. So what this did is it broke down videos into frames, like each frames, and it categorized either the frame was first, second, or third viewpoint, and then we kind of aggregated into a video level, and we calculate the proportion of each of the viewpoints and categorize the video as first, second, or third based on the highest proportion. It took, I think it took about like 20 hours to go through all the videos. And this is, again, a very simple crosstab, kind of store it based off of the proportion of the second person viewpoint. And although, I mean, the validity and reliability of this classification have to be verified, but it seems like they're capturing some interesting patterns here. Like if you see on the top, we see digital native news channels and some cable channels, which is really highly partisan. They're using a lot more second-person viewpoint. So they're using a lot more people to just directly looking at the viewers to elicit engagement. While local news accounts, like if you look at the bottom, they're heavily relying on first-person view videos. So we're capturing something interesting. But these clip and bird topic, while it's really useful, we still need further verification. So that leads us to what's next, right? So these are our next steps in terms of our summer plans and forward. First of all, we're gonna try to verify and validate and improve the topic modeling by transcribing the videos and building a label data set. So our graduate students have already started to build this data set so that we can further train classifiers and validate the ones that we have. And potentially, when you come to the visual models, we'll be able to use a little bit more advanced models like YOLO. And once we have those validated classifications, then the next step will be to investigate the association with those classifications as features and how that relates to all the different metadata like engagement metrics. And we're also opening up for collaboration as well. So if you have any interesting questions that you think you can answer with this data set, we're really open to collaboration. So graduate students and other fellow faculty members, please contact us if you have any interesting questions. And to wrap it up, this is our timeline. So we're right here. So we touch upon all the things up until this time. And our plan is for study one, we're gonna transcribe and build that data set across the summer. And our plan is to, from that computational study, probably have at least 2 articles ready for submission by the end of the year. And for the second study, our goal is to start collecting the data from the fall and build that data, the analysis as a foundation for our future grant application to, we have a target grant at NIH, so we hopefully will have a result that can be a foundational starting point to build up that application. So that's about it, and thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Lee and Dr. Choi for the great presentation, and sorry for the technical glitches we had. Okay, so next we have a project that explores the intersection of national issues and local politics. And so now we have Dr. Nicole Bauer and Dr. Mike Henderson presenting their project titled All Politics is Local, National Issues in Local Election Campaigns. And they're collaborating on this project with Dr. Belinda Davis from the Department of Political Science.
Thank you. I'm gonna just apologize in advance for the many times I'll probably throw this into the audience accidentally. I like to talk with my hands. All right, so our project, All Politics is Local, we're looking at the role of national issues in local elections. I'm gonna start off the presentation, and then Henderson will finish it. And Belinda couldn't be here, so all of your really hard questions during the Q&A, she's gonna answer them. This is just a little outline of what we're going to talk about. I'll talk about the scope of the project, half of the data collections before I hand off the baton. So our central research question is looking at how campaign communication, namely campaign ads, how it contributes to this trend we've seen over the past couple of decades of national political themes and topics becoming really dominant in state and local political elections. And so if you think about, if anybody has been watching like the state legislature hearings right now on public health things, right, like the Make America Healthy Again, national political theme is really dominating health policy in Louisiana right now, or national views on vaccines. So we've seen this happening a lot. We want to know, are candidates contributing to this trend? And do candidates in local elections have an incentive to emphasize national issues in their campaign messages? So are voters going to reward candidates who are talking about national themes when they're running for a local office, like school board, prosecutor, state legislature, city council, state legislature, state and local offices? So past scholarship on this has done a lot to define what we mean by the nationalization of politics, which is a somewhat clunky phrase, but it's the process where the issues and conflicts that dominate national level politics intrude into politics at the state and local level. We already know from past research that the news media contributes to this process. Part of this has to do with the slow, protracted death of local journalism, but we want to know, what role are campaigns playing in this process? So, to start off trying to understand how national issues become dominant in local themes, we've started off with a test case of a scenario where this could be happening. And so our test case is looking at school board elections. We're looking at school board elections for a couple of reasons. Number one, these are very, very local elections, right? They are also in a really specialized subject area. School boards, they set education curriculum in states, determine schools, like how schools get funded, teacher pay, these sorts of things. So these are races where it should be about local issues and themes. So we kind of think this is like a tough case to see if we're finding nationalized trends. If we're finding it here, we're probably finding it in other areas as well and in other elections. So we're going to start off with looking at what types of national issues emerge in school board elections. And then we've got an experiment to see if school board candidates benefit from emphasizing national issues. And our first data collection that I'll cover is looking at campaign ad data from the Wesleyan Media Project. We have about 10 years worth of that data because they're taking a very long time to release the 2022 data. But I know a lot of people in mass comm have used the Wesleyan data before. But if you haven't used it, it is a data set that includes an observation for every time a campaign ad airs in every media market for presidential, congressional, gubernatorial, state, and local elections. These are massive, massive data sets. So we're going to look at just the school board elections. And I've been doing a lot of work with these campaign ad data. So I just happen to have transcripts of 70,000 campaign ads that aired between 2010 and 2020. Yes, I watched them all. I'm happy to talk about why I made that decision 6 years ago and how I still wake up every morning, pour myself a cup of coffee, and I watch some campaign ads. It has broken my brain. With the school board races, we have about 365 ads that ran in school board races. So it's a pretty small sample of all school board candidates that could be there, and kind of the dynamics about how and when and why school board candidates air campaign ads. I'm happy to talk about that during the Q&A. But what we did with these data is we had some of my student workers in my gender and politics research lab review these transcripts to better understand what types of education-related themes are emerging in these campaign ads. So this is just a quick run through of our education issue code book. So these are all sort of like sub-issues with education. I'm not going to read all of these, but some of them are school choice, teacher pay, funding, those are all kind of local issues about education. We have some national education issues here, so Common Core, that was a big national level theme about a decade ago. References to the Department of Education, those are some of the national issues. So the students in the lab, these data, they're fresh off the presses. They finished it this week, but they read all of these transcripts and recorded any time an ad talked about one of these education sub-issues. So what I have right now are just some descriptive data about what we found there. So I broke these up into a couple of different slides. So these are the more locally focused education issues. The most common issue that comes up is school funding, which is sort of what you'd expect, followed by taxes. These are your property tax increases for school funding, and issues about school choice. And overall, this isn't in a huge percentage of the campaign ads. It's in just over 15% of each unique campaign ad. Some of these issues, they sort of transcend both state and local levels of office. So at this area, failing schools, which is both a state and local issue, was most commonly mentioned. But for our national education issues, we actually don't find a lot of national political themes emerging in this data set of school board elections. Now, this data set stops right before critical race theory and discussions of race and gender really started to dominate school boards. That happened after the 2020 election. So as soon as the Wesleyan Media Project, and I'm saying this so they can hear me here, they usually release the data from 2 years prior, like in January of after the next election. So I'm frustrated I don't have that data yet. But we don't find a big national focus in these data. But nevertheless, do candidates have an incentive to nationalize local elections? I'm going to pass this off to Mike.
Great, thank you. So my colleague apologized for accidentally throwing the clicker at you. I assure you, if I throw the clicker at you, it's quite intentional. So hopefully we don't get that. So we do want to continue the ad analysis. We're going to look at other local ads, like Dr. Bauer said. We're starting with school boards for a couple of reasons. They kind of keep things a little tidier for us. But this is both the part she just discussed and the experiment I'm about to show you. These are like the first sort of pilot run on what we hope to build out as a sort of a broader examination of local offices, local campaigns, and the use of national political topics, rhetoric in them. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the experiment. So it's a vignette experiment. We are going to we did manipulate two factors. Everybody's going to see, all our participants see a little narrative about a candidate running for office. We manipulate the first factor, whether or not that candidate is running for a local office or a national office. The local office is going to be a local school board candidate. The national office is a candidate running for the United States House of Representatives. The second factor is really the one that's like the one we're sort of most focused on. How they interplay, but this is going to be the manipulations we're going to examine within the context of each of these values of factor one. So factor two is where we're manipulating how they're campaigning, essentially what issues they're emphasizing. So we're going to have one set where folks are going to get just sort of education emphasis, one where they're going to get immigration emphasis, and one sort of both. So overall, it's going to be six conditions. I'm going to talk a little bit about why education and immigration. Education is partly because we knew we wanted to focus on local school boards first because it is tidy in the sense that it is local, right? The school board office is definitely a local office, but it's also jurisdictionally specific, right? School boards deal with education, like city councils deal with a lot of issues. School boards are jurisdictionally focused, not just geographic jurisdictions, but in policy jurisdictions. But also we wanted to make sure that if we're going to be treating this as local, there's some reason to believe that people might think of these issues as local, or at least not like predominantly national issues. And so we did so I'm going to show you the results of the experiment. That's like our first experiment. We hope to build out upon that experiment. So if that's like a pilot experiment, we did a pilot study before the pilot experiment. I don't know what you call that, like a pre-pre. So we wanted to see what people think about different issues in terms of are they national issues or not. So we did a quick thing, 500 participants, had them look at 25 issues. crime, energy policy, minimum wage, all kinds of stuff, and identify each of the 25 if they thought of them as mostly a national issue, mostly a state issue, mostly a local issue. And we were hoping to be able to use immigration. It turns out that's a good thing to use as our national issue. 90% of people identified immigration as a mostly national issue. That was fourth out of the, I should say, out of the 25 issues, 20 of them were identified as mostly national by a majority of participants. Immigration was the fourth highest, behind only foreign policy, climate change, inflation. So those were the top three. Immigration was right behind those at 90%. K-12 education was identified as mostly national by only 32%, which was the second lowest out of the all 25. The only issue that was seen as less national was crime. So we feel like we have a pretty good distinction here between how people think about these two issues. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a little bit concretely about what the actual manipulations are going to look like, what the conditions look like. So first, let's look at factor one. So everybody's going to see a vignette, and every vignette is going to have an introductory sentence and a final sentence that refers to the office the candidate's running for. So these are those pairs of sentences. So for the local office set of conditions, the vignette would start, Michael Williams is running for the local school board, then the issue information I'll show you in a minute, and then it would end with the race for the local school board is expected to be competitive up to election day. Same setup for the national office, the U.S. House. The idea here is like we're telling them what office it is, reminding them what office it is, so we can get like, okay, we know what level of office we're focused on. The issue stuff that comes between those, like I said, there's three variations of this. The local issue is going to be education. And the text was, Williams' campaign has emphasized education as a core and central issue. In his campaign, Williams has pushed for the local school board to provide vouchers that would allow families to pay for their children to attend private school. So I want to point out, this is the same text, right? If you're assigned to the local issue condition, whether you're in the local office or national office condition, this is the text you see. So we put in a reference to local school board here specifically to, again, double down on we want people to think of this issue as a local issue to see if that's going to matter when they're evaluating these candidates. Likewise, for the national issue, we refer to immigration here. It's immigration as a core and central issue. In his campaign, Williams has pushed for the U.S. Congress, so a direct reference to national political institution to reduce the number of immigrants entering the country. And the both condition just has both of those messages, right? So our candidates will either be running on emphasizing a local issue in a local office election, a local issue in a national office election, a national issue in a local office election, a national issue in a national office election, or both in local, both in national. Those are the six. So what are we looking at on the outcomes? We want to look at a couple of different things. We want to see if this shapes perceptions of whether or not this person's qualified for the local school board. Or also we ask about both. For each, whatever condition they're in, we asked if that particular candidate, if they thought that particular candidate was qualified for office for the local school board or qualified to be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. But we also really want to know this, like, is this going to affect their likelihood of voting for this candidate and how they feel about the candidate? So we used standard favorability measures. You know, do they like these guys or not? Favorable or unfavorable opinions. We did want to look at this bit too, though this is not really what we emphasized in this experiment. Part of what's going on here is broader in the discussion of nationalization in American politics over the last couple decades, is thinking about how that plays into partisan polarization in American politics. So we did want to kind of look at that too and see if people are exposed to different messages and patterns of messages versus offices, if that shapes how they see the two parties. So we had everybody rate the ideological position of the Democratic Party, of the Republican Party, and we took the absolute value of that difference as a measure of how far apart they see the parties. But I want to point out, our experimental manipulation doesn't reference political parties at all, right? So this is just sort of like a side thing to kind of test it out. We may do more with this in subsequent experiments. We did measure in the experiment, it's embedded in a survey, before they got to the experiment part, or well before they got to the experiment part, we asked them their own positions on a variety of issues, including the two issues that are used in this experiment. So we know what people think about vouchers. We know what people think about immigration policy. So we can also break out results that way to see if these issue positions moderate any effects of the issue and office combinations. We ran it on prolific, 1,000 participants. Okay, so this is, I'm going to show you a few graphs that kind of look like this. I know it's really small, the horizontal axis, that's by design, so you can't read it, and then I can just say it means whatever I wanted it to mean, regardless of what it actually says. So I'm going to present differences between two conditions at a time. And so the first thing we're going to look at is the effect on perceived qualification for the office that is referenced in the manipulation that the participant received. So the very first one over here, it's going to be the difference between those who were assigned to a school board condition, right? So they're a local office. The vignette's about a candidate for local office. The difference between a candidate for local office who is emphasizing immigration and only immigration versus a candidate for local office, local school board, who is emphasizing school choice and only school choice. If the estimate's below the horizontal red line, that means there's a negative impact. If it's above it, it's a positive impact. If it's overlapping, these are 90% confidence intervals, then we know we can't distinguish it from zero. So what do we see? If you are a candidate campaigning for a school board and you are talking about immigration, and that's the issue you're emphasizing, the national issue, people think you're less qualified to serve on the local school board. Interestingly, than someone who just is campaigning on education. Interestingly, this one, this next estimate is comparing those who see a candidate running for local school board emphasizing both the local education issue and the national immigration issue. What happens? Introducing that national immigration issue, even alongside the local issue, makes people think of you as less qualified for school board than the candidate who is just emphasizing the local education issue. These next ones are looking at the other kinds of mismatch. So now we're flipping it. We're going to say people who are assigned to a U.S. House condition, and we're going to look at their response on, is that candidate qualified for the U.S. House? And so if this is a candidate emphasizing education, the local education issue, and only the local education issue, compared to the candidate running for the U.S. House emphasizing the national immigration issue and just the national immigration issue, yep, they're seen as less qualified for Congress, the office they're running for, as is the candidate running for U.S. House that's emphasizing both the local and national issue. If you flip it around and look to see if they're qualified for the offices they're not running for, you don't really see anything there. None of those are distinguishable from zero. So we're not seeing effects there. We are seeing them here. So you might think, okay, maybe there's a penalty to be paid, right? If maybe candidates will pay a price if they go run for local office and are just out there talking about national issues, national topics, national themes, national politicians, right? You are seen as less qualified for the office. Okay, but do they really pay a price? What happens when you look at whether or not likelihood of voting for that candidate? So it turns out for local office, it doesn't matter. The candidate who's running for local school board and emphasizing national immigration issues is not any less likely to be, participants are not any less likely to vote for that candidate than they are to vote for the candidate for local school board who's talking about the local education issue. There's no penalty paid in terms of likelihood of vote for emphasizing the national issue. There's also not really a penalty for those running for Congress emphasizing a local issue. There is this interesting thing that if you talk about two issues, people, whatever the office is, people tend to be less likely to vote for you. Not really sure what that one's about. Okay, so this is similar. This is the favorability item. Again, there's no penalty paid. So the candidate who is running for local office, only talking about national immigration, is not seen as any less favorable, any more favorable than the candidate running for local office emphasizing local election. Same if they mention both. I want to take these two and I want to break these. We're going to set these guys aside for now. I want to break these two here. So focusing just on those in the local school board condition. But I want to break out these two by the participants' own positions on this issue, because this gives us some sense of maybe why we're not seeing this. So if we break it out by, so I'm going to show you this pair for respondents who, remember the message here, the candidate saying, you know, Congress, even though I'm running for local school board, Congress needs to reduce the amount of immigration into the country. So what happens when you look at people exposed to those messages who have a different viewpoint or share that position? So here is, there we go. So over here, these two are those same two estimates, but now we're only looking at participants who think that the number of immigrants into the country should increase rather than decrease. And it turns out they do punish the candidate that's running for local office using that national immigration issue. Folks that want to keep immigration about the same also like that candidate less. But people who, but see right here, if we're just looking at these two, we don't know what's happening. It could be that they like that candidate less because they don't like that candidate's position on the issue, or it could be they don't like that candidate because he's out here talking about a national issue and this is a local office, darn it. He needs to be focused on, federalism matters, right? Well, if it's the latter, we probably shouldn't see big positive results for people who agree with the candidate. Well, it turns out we do. So if you're running for local office and you're talking about talking about immigration, but the voters agree with your position on that national issue, they like you more, right? So they're not punished by voters who agree with them on the issue. The polarization bit, it doesn't make people think of the parties any further apart, but again, we did not emphasize party and reference party at all in the experiment. So what do we take away from this? So national issues and local elections do dampen perceived qualification for that office, but there's just no evidence that, that these issues themselves make voters make voters like the candidate or be willing to vote for the candidate less, unless they already disagree with the candidate on this issue. So like we interpret this as indicating candidates do have an incentive to engage in national issues, assuming that their position on the national issues is the widely held position in the district that they're running for. And we kind of think that matters, right? Because that suggests that candidates have an incentive to further introduce nationalization into our local politics, which the literature on that has certainly suggested that Americans know less and less and less about their local government. They don't think about when they're making decisions about the local government. They're not necessarily thinking about things happening in their local communities, which reduces the effectiveness of like accountability and representation and using local government as I think the architects of our institutional system here would suggest it's there for, to address local issues and local needs. This suggests that's going to be less and less likely to happen because candidates have an incentive to come here and be like, let's talk about Trump, rather than talking about like what your schools need, what your DA's office needs, or so on. So what are we going? We want to do more of these kinds of experiments. We want to build it out. We're looking at some funding opportunities. We hope to submit some proposals over the summer. We'd like to explore some other variations, positions, the candidates' positions on the issues, other kinds of national issues and local issues besides the two in this experiment, and also the intersection of the two. Like we looked earlier, Dr. Bauer showed you some sort of quasi issues that are like national topics, but in a local setting, things like the Common Core or critical race theory. Those would be explicitly about education, but also have this sort of national theme behind them. So we want to look at those kinds of variations. Plus, this project is working alongside of Dr. Bauer's Gender and Politics Research Lab, because as many of you who are familiar with the gender and politics research, there is a lot of evidence of gender identification of issues. And we know that matters for elections too, so are we going to see that different candidates with different gender backgrounds be more likely to do some of this with certain issues or with other issues, or more likely to pay a price for it or be rewarded for it than others? So that's where we hope to go, but this is the initial sort of tip of the iceberg for where we are. Thank you.
Our next presentation shifts the focus to the world of college athletics. So now we have Dr. Josh Jackson and Dr. Ryan Wang presenting their project titled Seeing NIL, How Media Shapes Public Perception of College Athlete Compensation.
Hey everybody, thank you all for being here today. Thank you to those who were in part of the judging of all these grants. Dr. Yang and I have had a lot of fun just figuring all this out and seeing what comes from all this. So as Dr. Park said, we are doing a little bit of the college sports thing today. So we give you two studies that we're working on currently regarding name, image, and likeness work involving college athletics. The first part is just kind of looking at how media is discussing NIL, which I will discuss, and then Dr. Yang will get more into how the athlete is kind of viewing themselves and how they are purporting themselves as in terms of being an NIL athlete and what the repercussions of that may be as we kind of go through this Wild West together, right? So for those of you that are a little unfamiliar, right, name, image, and likeness has largely kind of entered unruly to college in general, right? It's been about 4 years since the introduction or legalization of athletes being able to make profit off of their name, image, and likeness in video games, off of their jerseys that people buy, all of these other options, right? It was passed as a initial law in 2019. The full pass-through wasn't done until June of 2021. So when we're looking at our timeline, right, this was a big moment. Right, everybody is finally saying we can pay the athletes what they're worth. We're kind of creating some sort of equality for the college athlete, and the college athlete is now transitioning partially into the idea of the college employee. But what does that really mean from a media perspective? How are we discussing that? There are some that, as I mentioned earlier, consider this a much more kind of unruly, uncertain, disruptive kind of thing, especially because there is no active firm legislation on what NIL should be, how much athletes can profit, when they can or can't leave certain universities, and how much money they can take with them. We'll get to that part in just a second. The media, however, as a journalist, this is the part that I'm really interested in. It is how they are working to shape that public perception, how they are responding to every moment that NIL has kind of changed the game in the last 4 years or so. So from its inception to kind of this month, and I'll explain why the timeline is the way it is in a second, this is what we are hoping to process. Not only how media is discussing NIL previously, but how they are continuing to discuss it and how that influences the way that we view name, image, and likeness laws as they continue to come out. For the purpose of this study, Dr. Yang and I are using computational methods because we are pulling in so much data to look at how NIL is discussed in the media. We're looking at framing, a little bit of sentiment, and some ideological patterns as well here in our Beacon lab. So with study one, I guess I have to click over here. Yeah. You see the Cavender twins over here. They're kind of one of the early examples of name, image, and likeness. Two young women who were at Fresno State playing basketball as twin sisters and are now making much more money playing for the University of Miami. They are part of that case study. So in terms of our research questions, we're asking, what are the common frames in media? Very standard question here. Sentiment analysis, how does that change across the different media organizations that we are looking at? Does the sentiment change from positive, neutral, negative, depending on the position of that outlet? The most frequent individuals and institutions, LSU is a big name that we've kind of seen in our preliminary findings, Ohio State as well, University of Florida, Tennessee. So who are those major players, and how do those major players possibly influence how you process this NIL information as it hits your eyeballs, your ears, what have you. Are there any differences in how they're framed in terms of the political stance of these respective outlets? So is a Fox Sports versus an ESPN, are there differences ideologically in how these things are being reported based on those political stances? And then, I swear I'm gonna get this right, there we go. How do these kind of national media outlets in general differ to how they are approaching name, image, and likeness reporting in general? So, how are we doing this? In this data collection, we are currently scraping news articles and editorials from all these national sports-specific media outlets. So ESPN, New York Times, The Athletic, Fox Sports, USA Today, Yahoo Sports. This is just kind of the small example. We've got about 12 outlets in total that we are scraping. That also includes Washington Post and the LA Tribune as well. This time frame, right? So from July 1st, the actual start of athletes being able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness in 2021 to, crazy enough, today, April 25th, 2025. The reason that we are stopping data collection here is, one, because NIL is going to continuously change, and if I continue to just expand the time frame, it's just never going to stop, so I had to stop somewhere. But also, this week gives me an exact stopping point 2 weeks after a very specific recent NIL incident has happened, which gives me a fun place to just kind of push the pause button. So for context, this 2-week stop point is the announced transfer of now former Tennessee, now UCLA quarterback Nico Iamaleava, who decided that he would take a stand for himself going into this next season of college football, saying that he and his camp, his father and his agents, if you will, they wanted more money from the University of Tennessee. They were already getting paid about $2 million for him to play football. They decided, let's ask for more. So they were asking for about $4 million. And the University of Tennessee and their coach said, no, we're not paying that. So then he enters the transfer portal. He is now going to UCLA, where he is not being paid $4 million. He is being paid a little over $1 million, so didn't win on that part. But the fallout from that announcement 2 weeks ago of him asking for more money sparked another wave in what is happening here in NIL regulations and how controversial it is. This puts us in position to study not only how the media has covered NIL and its legalities and its question marks, but how they deal with the controversies that are also within this. So Nico is one of those cases. Matthew Sluka, for those of you that are familiar with his case as well, that's another case point that we are looking at. Matthew Sluka was a transfer quarterback at the University of Las Vegas about a year ago. He was told that when he transferred from Holy Cross to the University of Las Vegas that he would be paid X amount of money. That money was not received before the season starts as he was promised, but there was nothing on paper. He was promised a certain amount verbally. He went there. He was given a certain amount of money to transfer from Holy Cross in the Northeast to go to Las Vegas. And then the season began. He played 3 games. And before that 4th game happened, he said, I'm out because you didn't pay me. So he stops playing mid-season. The reason that he picked that 3rd game instead of continuing to play the rest of the season is because by NCAA regulation, if you play 4 games, you have washed your season. You cannot retain your red shirt. You cannot retain eligibility if you decide to play that 4th game. So he stopped right before. And this, of course, became another incident in NIL where you saw an athlete kind of take control of a situation. So in all of our analysis, what I'm getting to is we're not only looking at how the media is discussing this, but how the media is processing how the athlete negotiates their own power in all of these situations. We have a couple of APIs that we are using to scrape all of these websites and news articles. I'm in the process of cleaning and some of that text using some tokenization and limitations tools that we have. I am also going to categorize some of this through like the metadata, publication dates, outlets, of course, author, article type. Preliminarily, I have some findings as well that I can share with you from all of this. So an analysis plan. I'm doing some latent derelict allocation to do some dominant theme experiments here, some sentiment analysis as well, using some BERT stuff that Dr. Choi and Dr. Sutton talked about earlier, some framing analysis. The framing I will be doing manually only because I do not want to allow any sort of my own personal bias to influence the code process that is going to happen computationally. So instead of that, we'll be doing a standard kind of coding analysis using some intercoder reliability with some other researchers to make sure that we are all in agreement with how these frames are emerging through the articles that we are researching. So a little hybrid of the computational and the human method. Some network analysis, because when you do something like this, you have to have some maps to connect everything together between the subjects and how they're being reported on. It is preliminarily what I have seen that the female athletes and their NIL deals are being reported on much differently than how male athletes are, which probably comes to no surprise to many of us in this room, but when it comes to an NIL deal for a female athlete, they are of course more being associated to beauty brands, Lululemons, the Livy Dunns of the world, right? They're all focused on more so aesthetics, and of course the reporting also follows suit in that. It's more reflective of aesthetics, not discussing their athletic talent. The mention of money is a little bit more buried in those stories than it is for their male counterparts. It's very interesting. And then, of course, we are also doing some segmentation for the articles by that overall ideology. We are finding that everything right now looks a little neutral, but I'm only about 10% of the way through the articles total that we have. We're clocking just north of 20,000 right now, and I've gotten through the first 2-ish thousand. So what are we expecting here in total? Just a general analysis of how these frames have evolved over time. Of course, we started with this is NIL, this is great, this is dangerous, and now we're more so leaning into this is absurd. And we need to get a handle on what this NIL situation is. Again, there are no legal bodies in the current world for us to decide what this is going to look like and who is going to be that governing body to regulate any of this. That sentiment map of this NIL discourse, I'm a petty person. I like watching arguments happen on the internet. So looking at how this discourse is forming as well. Just looking at some of the identification of those influential voices. So in sports, we have these people that always stand out, the Adam Schefters, the Jeff Passons, the Doris Burks of the world, the reporters that you know who are associated to certain sports or certain types of reporting. We don't really have that in NIL yet. We have not identified who those major reporters, who those major players are, and hopefully through this research, we can really start to identify who are the people that we should be paying attention to for that legitimate information when these moments do happen. And then further, just any examination of all the biases, whether that be in kind of ideological, political, network, region, in terms of that NIL coverage. So just really breaking that down as well. We are having a lot of fun with this data, I will say. I look forward to your questions. But study 2, like as I mentioned, we're focusing more so on the athlete and their branding, which is also just as important as how the media is discussing these athletes. So I will pass things over to Dr. Yang to take over study 2.
Thanks, Dr. Jackson. So thanks, Dr. Jackson, to lay out kind of foundations, the whole project. I'm still in Polycom, okay? Mike, I want to assure you, I'm not betraying Polycom. So I'm still doing other projects related in the grant, but also more focusing on political influencer. But I think it's also what kind of a similar approach. But I think there are a lot of overlappings in terms of if you take a perspective, let's say influencer marketing, that kind of stuff. I can see a lot of things kind of overlap here. So as Dr. Jackson was saying, our second study here more focusing on student athlete identity, specifically what Dr. Choi and Dr. Lee were doing on TikTok. We are also looking at specific on this platform. So a little bit backgrounds on that. Social media is nowadays become primary platform for especially the NIL's monetizations in athlete branding, not just student athlete, but athlete in general. And a couple studies before in sport management, social media followings engagement are critical determinants of their NIL values, especially from the Starwoski's 2024 studies. And however, I think something is interesting in the student athletes is the role of student athlete kind of complicate what they call the identity by increasing the role conflicts and also intensify the role stress and shifting their financial motivations. Especially brought from like an argument from Friday with the lens of role theories. So what it means is that student athletes, originally they are students, but they're also athletes. And right now, because of NIL, they also on social media become an influencer. So basically they have mixed identity here, student, athletes, and influencers. And also, while NILs open a lot of opportunities for student athletes, both male and female, but if you look at the valuations of the due they're getting, you can still largely, the male student athletes are still more able to nail down like larger dues compared to female student athletes. So some people are arguing social media here might be a potential equalizers, like getting more financial incentive for females, student athletes specifically. For example, you look at Froje, from LSU, and also a couple student athletes in the past few years we have been talking in the media. However, there's another argument that it probably could be an incentive for potential equalizer, but at the same time, it also reflects what the gender norms, sexualization, objectification, that kind of stuff, when audience looking at students, athletes, especially in the gender role of female. So if you look at the literatures in the studying student athletes, specifically in sport comm and sport management, I think the previous scholarship mainly focusing on, well, one is like personal branding factors, for example, the qualities of the social media bio. I think that study, Coco et al., it was looking at Instagram specifically. And also a couple other studies look at Twitter, X. Also like posting frequency, and also like whether it's a verification status. And also they're looking at institutional factors, such as competition levels, university brand, and sport gender specifically. And some other scholars also look into contents. Specifically, they're comparing the portrayal of athletics performance versus personal life. And one of the studies actually find that like there's a huge difference between the male athletes, they are more focusing on athletics performance in their social media posts, while female student athletics are more focused on personal life. So what we try to do in this project is try to fill the gap here, because I don't think we have any literature or study so far focusing on something I call model pictures. Specifically, I'm talking about visual, acoustics, and textual specifically. And also, there's also another contribution here is focusing on NIL-related identity constructions. So the first questions we try to answer here is that how do student athletes construct their identity on TikTok? Again, student, athlete, and influencer at the same time. And we also want to see whether these constructions of identities differ by the gender specifically, the sport gender specifically. So we're using like computer visions extract visual pictures. When I talk about visual pictures, it's not necessarily about the content itself or the semantics meaning for that. I'm more looking into the basic elements. Okay, like color cues, brightness, constructs, maybe some semantics contents, but I think that require high levels of classification on that. And something I don't think much scholarship has focusing on yet will be the acoustic features like music, basically, sound. Specifically like TikTok, when you compare to other platforms, I think even though a lot of like Reels, like YouTube Short, they're still doing visuals, a lot of stuff, but I think musics or the background musics play a different part in that. So specifically, I'm looking into pitch, intensity, tempo, harmonic to noise ratio. There's like technically like fixtures in the acoustics or sound analysis. Textual fixtures, I think pretty straightforward as Dr. Choice and Dr. Jackson has mentioned, sentiments and topics, basically drawing their data from their captions, hashtags, and also speech to text, because in some of the video, they are talking. So you need to transcribe those. This is the first part of the question we try to answer. Second part of the question we try to answer is how do the student athlete construct their mixed identities? On TikTok specifically, are these representations shaped by the genders? And the third is how the audience respond to those. Even this two is more focused on their creator perspective. And this is more looking on the audience perspective. Like how do audience respond to those content created by student athletes? Specifically, whether this response also, again, whether this differ by genders and also whether differ by the content type. Specifically, we are looking on whether this is related to NIL, like promotion, advertising, that kind of stuff, or non-NIL, like maybe like nothing about promotion, nothing about the advertisements. If we look in the audience response, mainly we look at the comments. The comment most likely also like textual features. You can also extract sentiments and topic in general and stance detections as well. And the other one people look a lot is engagement metrics, like share, comments, views. That's pretty typical. So I think we are using this kind of like a similar time frames here as Dr. Jensen was talking about. But for the data collections, the first study more focusing on news organizations, but we are looking for the student athletes perspective. We have like curated lists, which is like starting from a website called on3.com. So basically you have 100 athletes. There are two curated lists, one for in general student athletes, the second is for female student athletes specifically. But some of their account might not that active, or they do not have much on TikTok, because some of them are more focusing on Instagram and other platforms. So we might need to supplement a couple others student athletic account into that. So, so we are trying to answer three types of questions here using like three approaches. One is that identifying self-presentation strategy. So after extracting all the features, visuals, acoustics, textual, we put them in the vectors, okay? And then we do unsupervised clustering, like k-means or DBSCAN, to try to find out the patterns, okay? Trying to find out the patterns and identify their presentation strategies. And second, we try to code, manual coding, I call it mixed identity or multi-identities, based on athletes, personal, influencer, and or mix of them, which could be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3 together. So we do a supervised classification and find the fixtures important, like which fixtures we talk about could help identify that specific identities. And the last one, kind of similar, using the similar fixtures, but the dependent variables you're looking is more the respondents from the audience. Oops. So I think both of studies still ongoing. So if you are any of you are interested in any of those, or either it could be sport communications, or either in influencer study, or in general you are interested in computational method, feel free to reach out. And that's it. Thank you.
And finally, we'll hear from Dr. Ruth Moon. She'll be presenting her project focused on the Global South. And she's collaborating on this project with Dr. Summer Hallow from the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm just gonna take another hour or so. So, you know, everybody buckle up, take some notes. Okay, so this is a way different kind of project than what the three previous presenters shared, in that my colleague Summer and I are really interested in figuring out how we can contribute to a solution for what the reviewers called a structural gap in scholarship rather than a gap of research or literature. So the problem we are really interested in, Summer is at UT Austin now, and she studies journalism in Latin America, and she has a long, long, long CV with a ton of great studies. And I, as a lot of you guys know, study journalism in primarily sub-Saharan Africa. So from both of our perspectives, we are very familiar with the problem of basically, I will say, like, imperialism in the academy, and especially as it shows up in journalism studies. We're very interested in, and continue to be interested in, and there's growing interest in how journalism looks outside of the Western world, and yet most of the scholarship is still produced about and by and for scholars in the Western world. So even people who are studying sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, such as Summer and I, are based in the West. I'm obviously white American. We have access to the resources from universities in the US. And so this continues to perpetuate this challenging problem of an overwhelming, I would guess, like, just the field is overwhelmingly tilted towards the Western world. You see a lot of stuff coming from the US, Western Europe, and some of that stuff is talking about other parts of the world, but there's very little research that makes it into, like, the global conversation from scholars based in other parts of the world. So really, I guess an ideal solution to this problem would be that you don't see a lot of literature produced by me, but that this lab can help support scholars in other spaces, other geographic places who are trying to do this work but are running into structural challenges. So we're really interested in trying to identify and then help collaborate and create tools to help other people collaborate to resolve some of these challenges and provide some more resources for this work. So, okay, so this is what I already said. But the problem is the journalism studies is persistently oriented around and biased towards Western perspectives, even though most of the world's journalists live outside the West, and there are many scholars in non-Western spaces. So I go to conferences in South Africa, I go to conferences in East Africa. There are tons and tons and tons of people doing really interesting research, and yet a lot of that research doesn't get to the spaces where this little world of Western white scholars is doing journalism research. So we can have a lot of debates about whether they should be interested in joining our world or not. But I would like, I want to help contribute to solving the problem, making it easier for that to happen. Okay, so we are envisioning this lab, like a traveling research lab. I used AI to generate a picture of diverse journalists. And this was the first thing it gave me. So, I appreciate the pink hair and some of the other things going on here. So our envisioned intervention is a virtual or physical or both space to connect scholars with resources and community. So we can encourage collaborative research, especially that bridges divides, traditional divides across north, south, east, west, these different geographic spaces that represent a lot of different resource access as well. So our Global South Journalism Research Collaborative Lab, which does not have a sexy acronym like some of you guys, so maybe I need some help with this, is a joint initiative that aims to cultivate a network of scholars and practitioners who can work together across geographic boundaries to increase our understanding of all the factors that contribute to the ability of journalism in the Global South to effectively fulfill a democratic responsibility. And I could unpack each of those words in the next hour of my lecture, but I will leave that to the Q&A. We can discuss more if you're interested. I wanted to close, I'm sorry, I feel like I don't know how to do a microphone. Okay, I'll just share a couple of things we're doing, concrete things we're doing to get here. So our end goal is the goal of this pilot seed proposal is to draft a larger grant proposal for a research center, basically to create a center that will let us continue this work on an ongoing basis. So we're piloting a couple of things over the next couple of months that will give us data that we can feed into a grant proposal to have a concrete plan for an ongoing community that provides resources for this kind of research. So the first thing we're doing, I have a grad student who has curated a list of journalism research and training programs in the Global South. So we just have like a list, which I think has not sure that has existed before. We haven't been able to find it. So now we have one. We also are planning an ICA 2025 pre-conference where we're modeling conversations around collaboration and collective brainstorming and problem solving. And finally, the thing that I most want to highlight to the students here is that we are also piloting this North-South Student Collaborative Research Mentoring Program, another thing that could use a more sexy acronym if anyone wants to help with that. And you guys are all invited to apply and participate in that. So what we're doing is we're taking some of the funding from the pilot, the seed grant, and splitting it out into sub-awards that we will award to a couple of different student research teams that consist of a researcher at LSU in the Manship School, partnered with a researcher based at a university in the Global South, and open to other university students as well. So basically you can bring in anyone you want, you, a student here at LSU, along with a student at a university in the Global South, and anyone else you want to include can propose a research project that somehow addresses or aims to help us better understand the challenges facing journalists in the Global South. And we are going to, Summer and I, are going to host a workshop to give you some resources for collaboration, talk through how we do this, how to think about budgets, how to think about ethics, how to think about a lot of the practical realities, and also a space for you to find collaborators. So if you have an interesting idea but don't know who you might work with, you can propose an idea and then come to this workshop. We will give you a space to kind of meet other people, discuss, and convene. And then we're going to mentor these projects through the publication process over the coming year with the goal of producing some research that really lives out this, that really, I guess, addresses this shortcoming in the fields through like a concrete next step. So that's what we're doing. That is my 1 hour presentation summarized, and I'm happy to answer questions in the Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Moon, for making your presentation brief so that we can have a time for a Q&A. Okay. So now we'll open up the floor for questions. So I'd like to ask all of the presenters to come forward and take a seat at the front table. And if you have a question, please raise your hand. Then we'll bring, and actually our PhD students too will bring the microphone to you so that everyone can hear your question.
Thank you all for the presentations. They were very interesting and very long, but very interesting. This question is for Dr. Jackson and Dr. Wang. In looking at NIL, we've had a lot of athletes that have kind of started their athletic career in this NIL period and have since graduated. I'm thinking of like the Livy Dunns or the Paige Beckers who have really benefited from this kind of program and able to illuminate themselves to the world. Are you planning on incorporating any athletes who have since aged out of college in your study when you're looking at how NIL has kind of changed the narrative and how we speak about these college athletes?
Yeah, you want me to take it from study 1 and you can take it from study 2? Okay, yeah. Study 1, it's a little bit easier since we're looking at how they've been reported on. So whether it is Livy or the Cavender twins or Sam McCormick, who has played 8 years of college football, or Sedona Prince, who has played infinite years of women's basketball at this point, right? TJ Finley, who's just transferred from Tulane this morning, his 6th school, right? So like all these people, I expect them to be included in how that media process works. I expect, and from what we have seen, even though Livy has now aged out of NIL, for lack of a better phrase, she's going to be a prominent part of this for us. Paige as well. Floje also showing up very often. So yeah, I think for at least study 1, they'll be included in all of that for sure.
And I think this on study 2, sorry. For now, the list we are putting together, they are more focusing on right now as a student athletes in the college. So we might include that, but that more like a follow-up, I would say. But that would be an interesting question, and maybe a comparisons before and after, that kind of stuff on that as well.
The current list that we have from On3 does include Livy and Paige in it, since they are current athletes since we started the study, so they'll be in it. But any athlete that would have graduated last year, hypothetically, so like Angel Reese won't be a part of the initial data collection of the NIL stuff that we have, just because she's not a part of the current On3 list that we're generating that data from. But in future study, for sure.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. This is a question for Dr. Bauer and Dr. Henderson. I'm just wondering, given you included a couple of issues for local, and then, for example, drug issue in Louisiana and drug issue in California are on different levels of agenda for different states. So I'm just wondering, like, maybe how do you select the issues, and then, like, given the issues differ in their level of maybe issue importance by state, how do you reconcile this?
I can tell you how we chose like the issues overall. It's based on things that were already pre-coded in the Wesleyan Media Project dataset. I think maybe Dr. Henderson can talk a little bit more about why we mixed immigration with education, because that was his idea, and I just can't remember why we did that. But I think what you're getting at is this sort of like, you know, what's a local issue here might be a local issue, like not be a local issue somewhere else, or what makes something local in one state, like there might be a different dimension to it in another. And right now with the ad data, we're just looking at mentions of issues, not necessarily like the context in which they are. I think that's something we could look at and consider. I will say one of the problems with this in the pre-test that Mike talked about is that like we're trying to figure out how people think about issues as local, state, and national, but we're also trying to measure that like after this process of nationalizing politics has occurred, right? So it's just like we couldn't find very many issues that were local issues, like overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I mean, again, for the purposes of the experiment, we, you know, asked people a bunch, and we basically picked some that were out at either end. So that gives us some latitude on it, but you know, it is true, because like even like immigration, which we're characterizing as a national issue, that's going to have different salience in you know, the Rio Grande Valley or New York City than it will in, I don't know, will it though, in Morehouse Parish, because of the nationalization of those things. And there is like I mean, I'm sure you know, there's a bunch of evidence that is showing that local conditions are less predictive of political attitudes than they used to be. But we actually have talked about, both for the ad data, and I guess we could do this for the experiment as well, although we would need to run it in such a way that we know where our respondents are, that we can place our candidates in their local jurisdiction. So for instance, our local school board races in the ad data, we know what school board they're running in. Well, we have indicators of that. We can merge that with all kinds of Stanford Education Data and Archive, the NCES, assuming the NCES still exists, with all kinds of data about local education conditions. But that's also why I think it'd be interesting to get at how these issues kind of interrelate with each other geographically, but also just sort of like, because when we were designing this experiment, there was another, there are actually a lot more conditions until Dr. Bauer wisely said, why do we have a 24 condition experiment?
You have to stop. You have to stop somewhere.
There was one where we were looking at immigration and education overlapped, where it was a reference to immigration within the context of education. So things like funding for ESL programs. Yeah. So there are a lot of those kinds of variations. We think we have a good place to start, given the data that shows that people see at least education and immigration as distinct in terms of their nationalizationness. But you're absolutely correct. It's going to vary by geography as well.
Okay. I will, similar to the other two question givers, great presentations. This question is more for Dr. Wang, so you're off the hook for this one, Dr. Jackson. Can I ask why you chose TikTok instead of Instagram for looking at how these athletes are representing themselves?
To be honest, I think it's easier to scrape. But we are thinking about Instagram as well, because looking at the On3 list, a lot of people actually do not have much posts on TikTok. So we actually talked to Fanny, and she told me the sprinkle is not really working for Instagram. But I think they have the content libraries. But I haven't heard anything about that, like how people, like how accessible on the content libraries. So like that's like a public API from Meta. So I'm not sure how well it is yet. Oh, awesome. Oh, nice. Is it good? Like. No, I haven't gotten on it yet. Okay. Yeah. So we originally talking about both Instagram and TikTok, but another layers is like, because we are also looking on the music part. So I'm not sure whether, I mean, I'm pretty sure TikTok can, well, it can extract the music, but I'm not sure the Instagram. And not necessarily every post have musics. So I think to fit in the emphasis here on multimodalities, I think TikTok will be, comparatively speaking, more feasible choice here. But thank you for the questions.
Okay, so I have the microphone now. So my question goes to Dr. Moon. Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in your center because it deals a lot with West Africa, and coming from West Africa and from Nigeria, and being a journalist before going into academics, I can, connect to what you're saying. There's this lack of global visibility when it comes to journalistic output from journalists or academics, journalistic academics from Western Africa. I don't know about other African countries. Now, this question goes to strategy. Like, what strategies do you intend to employ, knowing, or I don't know if you're aware, but we have issues with relating to Western media or anything Western because of the concept of neocolonization. Issues around news flow imbalance, issues around not being genuinely intentional about the white man's intention in Africa. So I was a journalist for over 5 years. I had my own radio shows, and we were given specific instructions on how to relate with especially white journalists and Western non-governmental organizations. So we are very, very reserved in terms of collaboration, and we are not willing, I don't know if it's changed now, but right now in the country, we will not, I repeat, we would not intentionally and genuinely collaborate with Western outfits when we are not sure that their intentions are typically genuine. Now, how do you intend to overcome this particular obstacle? Because the major issue relating, or that we attach to the underdevelopment in Africa, is the Western people and how they have colonized and continue to, colonize Africa through the back door. So we journalists, we know, like, we say that the pen is mightier than the sword. That is what we always go with. So we want to have control of what goes out there, and we want to do that with our genuine intentions. So my question is, one, how do you intend to overcome this issue? And what strategic points of contact do you think that you intend to reach out to be able to break even into the journalistic profession, or the Nigerian Union of Journalists, or the Union of Journalists in West Africa? And I also want to know, how do you intend to reach to the people you are targeting, considering the fact that majority of the journalists are not part of the academic scholars? People who do the real job do not belong to the academics. And there's this distinction, differences between the professional bodies that guide the professionals and the academics who deal with journalism. So it's kind of complex and a little bit messy, but I would want to know the strategies you would want to employ if you intend to break even and have a seamless transition into establishing a lasting relationship and collaboration with a view to projecting whatever comes from Africa, and specifically, I'm specifically interested in Nigeria.
Yeah. Well, I will take another 2 hours to answer that question, so I hope you're all ready. And it sounds like we should do an independent study, because we could just talk about it for hours. But I would say the short answer is, for this specific piece of the project, I want you as students and we have a number of international students here at Manship who have lived experience in non-Western spaces, and I want to see, I want to provide the tools and resources for those people to be pursuing collaborative projects with people who are still on the ground in spaces that you have perhaps come from, perhaps lived in, perhaps not, but are interested in. But basically, I'm intentionally trying, Summer and I are trying to provide a space where we're not leading the project, but we're providing tools and resources to help people who are less represented take up space in the conversation in a way that has not is not necessarily easy to do. I also would say, like, I don't think our vision is to try to force people to collaborate, but to provide tools to make it easier to do for people who want to do it. So I would not say, like, journalists in Nigeria should have to partner with Westerners, like, but if they wanted to be part of a research project, the vision for this lab is that we're able to provide some resources to help make that easier to do, is the short answer.
Thank you. And I wish we had more time for a Q&A, but now it's a little over 1:30, and so I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So thank you all for being here with us, and many thanks again to our presenters for sharing important work with us. And I'd like to extend a special thanks to our staff members, Anna, Catherine, Robert, Joseph, and Sheldon, whose work behind the scenes has been instrumental in coordinating this event. And so thank you, everyone, and this concludes the scheduled program, but please feel free to stay and continue the conversations with our presenters. Okay, so thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Actually, I'm also using the West here.